Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of America.
I'm Tommy Simons. This is Year Zero. Today, LB Muniz. LB is the host of the Been Awake podcast, and he has his Been Awake Substack, which will be linked in the notes below, where you can find articles, essays, and his podcast at his Substack. So, go check that out. LB's a great guy. He's a great thinker, as you'll find out here in this podcast. I had LB on because both of us have kind of like been struggling with the utility of the terms left and right and what they actually mean. So I wanted to have somebody on that I could just kind of bounce thoughts off of and have this conversation with. And we get into a little bit of history and philosophy and all kinds of good jazz. So I think you'll really enjoy this. It's more of an untangible kind of abstract idea that we're trying to piece together because language has become so limited. It's become so meaningless. Words have become so meaningless that it's hard to identify what people are actually saying whenever you get in political conversations with them. So I really thought this was an important subject to talk about. As always, RyanBunting.com. For all of your graphic design needs, go to RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a great libertarian and a great anarcho-capitalist. He's also a great graphic designer. He designed my podcast logo. He also started his own business here recently, and so he's working independently as a contractor for himself, doing all kinds of tech work and graphic design, as usual. He also wrote a book called Project Manicore you can find at RyanBunting.com. So, if you need any help with your tech solutions or graphic design, or you just want a good fiction book to read that shares libertarian principles, go to RyanBunting.com and call him a racist while you're at it. LibertarianInstitute.org is where you can find this podcast, as if you didn't already know that. Patrick McFarlane with Liberty Weekly, Kyle Anselm with Conflicts of Interest, Keith Knight with Don't Tread on Anyone, and Scott Horton Show. There's also a lot of writers at the LibertarianInstitute.org, like Sheldon Richman. You'll see Jim Bovard, Connor Freeman, Will Porter. We got a great cast of characters over there at the LibertarianInstitute.org doing lots of great work. So go over there to the LibertarianInstitute.org and keep up with all the news from the libertarian perspective and find out how you should be thinking. I'm just kidding. That was a joke. It was a bad one. Sorry. We're not brainwashing you. Well, we kind of are. But, yeah. Thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. Okay. I am here after a very intense opening conversation prior to recording with LB Muniz. What's up, buddy?
How we doing, Tommy? Excited for the conversation. Didn't even realize we weren't recording.
I know. I feel bad. I'm like, I should have just hit. I did that. I did the same thing the first time I interviewed Richard Grove. Like, because like I bring people on and I just kind of chat with you for a minute and just warm up, and then I'll hit record and intro you, and he just starts going off, and like I'm like 20 minutes in, I'm like, whoa. I should be recording this, Richard, and he's like, you're not recording yet? I was like, oh, dude, no. So yeah, I've done it before. So
it's, it happens. And thankfully I think we didn't get too far down the road, and I do have it. So, if you want to throw that out for some premium stuff, but it's also good to have that little bit beforehand where we can, as I like to say with my conversations, like get in tune with one another so we can try to figure out where the other one's coming from.
Right. So we're here. We're going to talk about the identifiers left and right. Identity seems to be a big deal nowadays. I guess it always has been to a certain extent. It's just I prefer to identify as a biker or a metalhead than anything political.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
But I got in touch with you because, like I told you before, I really appreciate the way that you break things down and how thoughtful you are about the way you think about things. So I thought this would be an interesting conversation, and you would like shed some light on some things that I'm struggling with, because I hear people say like, well, if you don't identify as left or right, you're probably left, or things like that, or you're just the whole libertarians are neither left or right, they're the third wheel, or whatever. And I'm like, does any of this ever actually really define anything in any significant way?
I think
that's pretty much like my entire thought. It's like,
yeah,
I just
yeah.
I
So
can't
we
find
have these
it.
words.
I can't find the utility in it.
So we have these words left. We have these words. We have this word left. We have this word right. We have this vague concept that there are people who are left and there are people who are right. But then because it's an inherently political term, it's always put in a frame that is necessarily combative. And I think, I think to your point, just talking about the evolution, which we were getting into a little bit before. So if we're going to trace the historical case, and you were saying it was, Rothbard at least can trace it to the courts of the French courts. There's also a corollary in Hegelianism, where after Hegel, you kind of had like the left Hegelians and the right Hegelians who said, look, this proves our worldview. And so I was somebody who for a while was that person. I was like, oh, there's no left, there's no right, there's just people, and people are different. And so, just because somebody doesn't view the way that I view it, the world, doesn't mean that they view the world in like a negative way. They just have, I just have a piece of information that they don't have. And I think there's an element of youth to that. There's an element of like, when the way you're supposed to, or the way they tell you at least to like go through school, even though that's not really how it works. Because if you do have an opposing opinion, you find out very quickly that you are of the opposing opinion. And so you might get shut down very quickly. So like so the problem is we have this historical case, we have contemporary usage, we have reinterpretations of these ideas, and they are terms which are ubiquitous. Like you're like literally everybody who's listening to this, everybody who will listen to this has a left and has a right at this exact moment in time. And yet that left and that right, necessarily speaking, unless you're standing in the exact same place as another person, is actually different. So which to me says that left and right have to have some sort of contextual, they're contextual terms. They're not absolute. It's the difference between saying something is larger and saying that something is, something is like 20 feet.
Well,
right.
You're saying that you have to define the center before you can define left or right.
Clearly, right? And I think that's inherent in like the way our brains are structured. Like spherically speaking, you have to have a vector. If you're operating in 3 dimensions, you need to have a vector with which you're moving forward. That is literally speaking orientation. And there's a degree to which we as human beings have to orient ourselves to reality. At least that's the way I would put it, because there's our perception of things, and then there's the thing that's actually happening, and then there's other people's perception of things. These are like the building blocks of Western philosophy, of Western thought, of trying to map out this thing we call human consciousness. Does that work? Being in brackets has been kind of what I've been using to describe it lately in text form. But just like this, because consciousness has a more specific definition these days, and because of scientific advancements and things like that. But so this idea of being, for me, is really important, and then how you orient yourself in that and to interpret reality, and then how you process the information that's coming in. So that's kind of, so eventually, which is to say eventually, when everybody keeps using the terms left and right, you kind of give up the idea. You can either say no, you can stomp your feet and you can say, no, I'm not going to use these terms are stupid, Or Chesterton's fence, you can say, all right, what are people trying to describe when they say this? And I think that's where then, okay, so you have to go looking for different definitions of it.
Right. And
you know,
that's part of the issue I've found with some people. Like, I used an example when you and I were chatting earlier, that Popular Liberty and I were going back and forth, and we were talking about this. And I was like, man, I don't know if left and right is actually correct. I don't know if that is actually the problem. And I can't remember exactly what he said, so I'm not going to like just make shit up. But I said, I come back and I was like, yeah, but does that mean that Jimmy Dore is on the right and that Liz Cheney is on the left? Like, I don't, is the problem really left or right, or is it authoritarian libertarian, or is there another problem here? Like, what is the actual issue that we're trying to solve? And I don't know if left and right is the proper way to address the problems that we're trying to solve at this moment in time.
Talk more about that.
So if you think, a lot of people think, especially people more on the right, and I'm not like calling anybody out, but more people that consider themselves more on the right, more of a traditionalist or a conservative kind of thought leader, they consider left to be degeneracy or evil, right? But I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think there is a subset of people, probably sick individuals, that have taken their pathology and shaded it into an existing ideology. And they're trying to shape that ideology in order to promote their pathology, right? And I think you get this on the right too. So I think this is where the whole white supremacy Nazi argument comes from, to a degree. And I think it's also where, you know, the what you call it, the story time. It wasn't transgender story time. It was cross-dresser.
Drag queen story hour.
There you go. Drag queen story hour. So you had like these extremes on either side. And so as you develop, as these extremes have developed more their arguments, and their arguments have developed into an authoritarian kind of mantra, then anybody who is slightly right or slightly left by the, you know, contemporary standards is going to be lumped in to this authoritarian group. And so I'm trying to figure out, is it actually left or right? It's kind of like this question. All right. So I read it, like an article came out today on Mises.org, and it was saying Hitler was on the left.
Yeah.
If you talk to anybody who considers themselves on the left, they'll say, no, Hitler was on the right. Right. So if you look at like let's say my historical understanding of what left and right meant, the right was more freedom oriented, more individualistic, less adherent to the institutions and the structures of society. And so that would be the left, and the right would be more conservative and wanting to hold on to the monarchy, hold on to that control and that structure. But that doesn't mean that just because you're both saying I'm anti-establishment, which is basically what the left would say, that I'm anti-establishment like a Bastiat, that doesn't mean that you agree with every other person that is anti-establishment. It just means you're anti-establishment. And the way I understand the way that the term came up in the French Parliament is that was like the dividing line. Those that wanted to keep the established order and those that were anti-established order, right? And so when we talk about it today, it's like, is it collectivism versus individualism? Is it chaos versus order? Which I've had people tell me all these things, right? Is it gay and less gay? Like, what is it? You know? So I'm trying to wrap my head around, like, okay, when you're saying left and right, and not you, but the King's you.
Yeah.
What are you trying to tell me? Like, what are you conveying to me? What are you saying? Are you saying, like, the LGBTQ activists, and what is it on the right? Like, if you consider the most, like, because it seems to me like no matter what side you identify with, whether you identify as the left, you identify as the right, whatever side you're on, you see that whole side as normal as you are, and the other side you see as its most extreme. So no matter where at you see yourself on either side of the political spectrum, you are fighting the most extreme example of the opposition.
Yep. And there's a tendency, and I think the democratic governance exemplifies that, right? Because how do I distinguish how do you distinguish yourself in a crowded field? Well, you have to keep going to the most outlandish thing you can say, right? It's if there's 6 carpet stores next to each other and 6 of them are going out of business, how, tomorrow, how are you supposed to distinguish yourself from your competition? Right. And that's that, it's like you have to get more in your face. You have to try and be more brash, especially the broader of an audience you want. And ostensibly in democracy, that's what you're looking for as a politician. So I think, to make it meta, I suppose, I think part of the problem is I believe this, like, this is stuff that I'm actively working out right now, but I think we need to recap all of politics for at least, let's say the last 50 years, or since the end of the Second World War, can be mapped onto a Cartesian plane on which you have left and right, which are economic measures. This is the political compass. The reason why I use it is because everybody understands it, and while imprecise, it does a good job of letting you map things out. And we can come back to why. But I think right now you have left and right as your economic indicators. Right being more laissez-faire, left being more I don't know what word we want to use, parental.
Maternal.
But what's the word I'm looking for? Not paternal. Yeah, I guess it would be paternalism or maternalism, and that's an interesting distinction to make. But to the point, and then you have on the top, on the y-axis, you have authoritarian and libertarian, right? And that has, generally speaking, been a way in which most people in the West, in the United States, we might say, can map out political ideologies cross-culturally, because we understand there are differences between the specific political interests of each group, even if by and large you maybe more identify with the Tories in the UK versus the Labour Party,
right?
As the case may be, right? So but you can understand that's different. And so what this Cartesian plane has allowed for is the ability to map things out cross-culturally. And so you can kind of like try and create something approaching a metric by which you can distinguish it. My contention would be right now, at this moment in history, we are in the midst of a recalibration. And that's one of the reasons why things don't make sense politically. And we can trace this very easily back to left and right in a couple of ways. But let's belabor that point for a minute, where like it kind of follows that we're not able to understand what's going on properly if we don't have the correct if we don't have the correct limits on which to put our thought. Right. If we're not having a conversation of authoritarian versus libertarian politics, well, then what's our conversation? What is it at? If we're not having a conversation between laissez-faire and command and control economy, then what's our conversation? And these are the kinds of things that I think are the reason why we're actually using a word like left and a word like right more often than not. I think, in fact, because it has to do with the fact that we're moving to a lower resolution for way of perceiving the world.
Yeah.
The last time I was on your show, we kind of talked about my like the Trinitarian idea of instinct, reason, and faith, and that the mistake of the Enlightenment was thinking that instinct and reason are these like separatable things, and I would argue they're more like a trinity, and they actually all act in concert with each other. Instinct, reason, and faith perhaps being one of the most important ones. So putting it in that framework, again, I have to put things in a frame.
You remember that?
Yeah, well, it was one of the few places I've gotten to talk about it openly. So, it's very central it's very critical to the way I perceive the world.
Yeah.
And so when we take that sort of a framework, and I've tried to like reconcile that with some of the new ideas I've been experiencing and like being introduced to. And so when I take a look at that and I say, okay, at the instinctual level is the level of the binary. It's us or them. Right. And I think I think left and right are another manifestation of that people are participating in right now as a consequence. And it just so happens to be the case that it is going both ways, right? It is the right against the left, and it is the left against the right in that amount. Ill-defined as they are. So what are those things ill-defined? Well, that's where I was saying, I think before we started recording, basically like taking a amalgam of a bunch of stuff. First off, one of the best definitions of leftism I've heard recently, with which you can actually build something on, I think, was from Charles Haywood, who kind of has been making the rounds. And I find him a very interesting thinker. And I hope, I'm sure I'll talk to him at some point, but I hope to talk to him.
He's such a cool guy, man.
He seems so interesting, and just like, oh my gosh, wait, you've been doing this. It's like when you get that person, you like, or for me, like I hear someone like, wait, you've been working on this problem too, and you're like 30 years older than me. What do you got? Give it to me right now.
Yeah, right.
Like, like I was reading Nietzsche and like studying Greek myth, and had always been kind of interested in Jungian psychology, and suddenly this guy Jordan Peterson gets put in my face, who had kind of like tried to reconcile with some of those ideas too. Similar thing with when I was as I've been introduced to Charles Haywood. And what he talks about is when he defines leftism, and of course you can tell the mark of a thinker by the way they define their terms. He defines leftism as maximal liberation and maximal egalitarianism. And I like that idea of maximal because it implies, at least to me, putting it back into my frame, this idea of calibration. That really it's about like really you perceiving the world as a matter of calibration and making sure you're interpreting your sense data correctly. And we just have this like magnificent thing behind our eyeballs here that is capable of doing a lot of great things, but also a lot of horrible things, depending on how it's calibrated and depending on what it's trained to do. But there's also a substrate. There's also a level beneath that you don't have control over, right? The millions of years of evolution, we might say, or like just your lineage, right? Your patronage, like the family you come from, and in that psychologists measure it, they measure it in terms of like big five personality. So the question becomes, is there a difference between people who identify as left and identify as right in terms of like big five personality? And in fact, you do see like more neuroticism in left-wing people. People who are left-wing tend to be more neurotic. People who are right-wing tend to be more orderly. So they tend to be higher in conscientiousness. And those are the ones that I know, at least. There was another major predictor, but I don't want to speak out of turn in the context of this conversation. So I don't want to, which is to say, I don't want to get it wrong. But suffice to say, this political manifestation that we call, generally speaking, left and right, seems to have, we can argue, some sort of biological temperament on which it is based. So in times of transition, it flows from that, at least from my perspective, as I've tried to make sense of this, that people would kind of return to this left and right. Now, in the American context, I think the words really get interesting because you said like, or, I think you started by saying that the right was for freedom and then said like the left would think they're more for like anti-establishment and that sort of thing. But of course, what is an American right in that context? If the right is traditionalism, loyalty to a king, what is an American right in the context of that? Now, you could say it's still a monarchist, and those people exist out there. One of them being Curtis Yarvin, who says that right is order and left is chaos, per se, as the case may be. And maybe he would take exception with thinking that right is order per se and left is order per se. But when you say that the right is order and the left is chaos, people who have a less sophisticated understanding of the world are going to take that idea and run with it as if that was a literal truth. And I by the way, I think politically speaking, it makes a lot of sense to actually to put things in terms of that, especially as we see that manifested right now. However, it is not a complete picture because that political realm, the people who actually have political opinions and back them up are a vast minority of people. Right? The same way in which with spectator sports, that you might know a lot about a team, but you don't have any skin in the game. Right? Somebody with a season ticket to a sports team might have more skin in the game. The same way in which somebody of the donor class has more skin in the game than the average person in America. But the people, so I do think at a level you can say that the people who operate at like in that super political realm, the people of the left are chaotic. But it's a matter of why. Like what is to the point? What is chaos? What is order? Well, I don't think chaos is separatable from order as in the same way I don't think man is separatable from woman. And I think, in fact, going back to that biological substrate, that's like an inherent way that we have to view the world. We view the world as us and them before we think of things in terms of you're from, somebody from Ukraine versus somebody from Russia, to be topical for a moment. Right? The us and them happens before this construct of our minds. And like calling it a construct isn't a criticism. It's just an observation of how we as humans create reality in the Nietzscheans, in the way Nietzsche would put it. Yeah, that in fact, like if you remove us from the equation, like it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, perception is reality. I mean, that's just the way it works. And you're not going to be able to change that. The reason I have a problem with the chaos and order is because name somebody you would think that is on the left. And I guarantee you that, let's say it's a LGBTQ activist, right?
Yep.
They are trying to implement order.
Yes.
It's just a different type of order.
Correct.
And then I have a problem with the laissez-faire argument of right and left, the laissez-faire versus the command economy. Because if Hitler was on the right and Stalin was on the left, they were both command economists. Neither of them were laissez-faire. You see what I'm saying? So it's what is it that differentiated Hitler from Stalin is what one was a globalist and one was a nationalist?
Technically speaking, an internationalist or a nationalist would be the differentiator, because the globalism wouldn't have been a term in vogue. Okay. And so the nationalist would be for his nation taking over the world, and the internationalist would be somebody who would think that the workers of the world should unite. So like we can tell that story, or is there a different story to tell? And so if you'll give me a little bit of leash, I'll tell you a different story of the 20th century.
No, go for it. I'm asking questions here. So.
Yeah. Right. Well, so I think let's tell the story of the 20th century a little bit differently, right? And let's take this in terms of that we can understand ideas in terms of schools of thought, and that those, schools of thought can have some sort of a limit to them.
Okay.
And let's look at broadly speaking socialism, of which was an ideology of the late 19th, 20th into the 20th century, and through to today, you might say as well. But in that they were born in during the Industrial Revolution and after that time, unless you would disagree, and if I'm missing something historically.
I don't think so. I think you're right.
So on the continent, which was the seat of Western civilization at the time, on the European continent, you had different variations of these temperamental attitudes. And one of them was the communists, who were internationalists, and it was all about the workers of the world uniting. So this oppressed underclass, engaged in revolution against the elites of the time. and you had, but then you had these, and I think Paul Gottfried is where I got some of this from, where he went on his book of fascism, but it's like kind of a poor reflection of that, because I'm sure his take is far more research than mine. But to the point of like, fascism was a nationalist reaction to the internationalism that still employed the same economic means, by and large. They just took a slightly different approach, and you could say they took a more pragmatic approach, because they weren't as concerned with the government controlling everything if the government was the institution that was, making sure that the companies were doing what they wanted them to do. But the defining characteristic against a fascism was against the communist internationalist perspective, and it was the idea of it was being for your own nation. I think I don't think you put the Nazi regime as neatly into those boxes, because in fact there was a lot of communist influence on the early Nazi party. Yeah. And they pivoted nationalist because of, perhaps the German people just didn't want something that was Russian, and that had gained a distinct Russian flavor in that time period. So I think so. But at the end of the day, where you place Hitler or Stalin or Mao or Wilson or Roosevelt or Kennedy, where you place these men on a map is a question of what do you have setting up the limits of that map. And so we're back to like the idea of a structure existing before the metrics by which we try to measure something out. And so a Cartesian plane is very, very useful because it's two intersecting lines. Well, the single line is also very, very useful. And that single line is where we get this monolithic interpretation of left and right. So let's get back to the story of the 20th century. There was something else happening in the world, in the United States in particular, this new area of the West that was really coming into its own. And they looked at the continent and they took these ideas of socialism and they did something different with it. And they called it progressivism. And they called it was all about progress. And it was about technocratic control, the managerial class over the capitalist class. Right?
Yeah.
So we fast forward through the 20th century and we have the big battle between these three schools of socialism: progressivism, communism, fascism. Communism and fascism lose.
I've always said that fascism was a combination of progressivism and communism, because it seems to me like from all the reading I've done that like fascism actually popped up later. It popped up after progressivism. Like communism was there and then progressivism popped up. And then you ended up with fascism, which was, it kind of felt like it was like a combination. Like you can see where they're pulling like economic ideas from both sides. And like the eugenics program was completely progressives. That was
correct.
It
was all American, right. Baby. As American as apple pie.
Right.
You want to talk about the darkness of our history. If you are an American, like it's right there. Right. But yeah, and I wasn't trying to imply that fascism begat progressivism.
Oh, no. I was just kind of telling you like the way I've always kind of put it together in my head. It seems like fascism is a combination of progressivism and communism. Like,
oh, sir, yeah. Well, and like progressivism was basically this thing of like, well, we can't convince Americans of this stuff because Americans all think they're going to be millionaires in 10 years, right? Because they've seen it happen. It was a different story back then, but a similar one nonetheless. And so one way, like, and as Jeff Dice says, illiberalism won the 20th century. Progressivism won the 20th century. Like they've been dominating the 21st century. And what progressivism is a corporate socialism. And that's where I think to your point that fascism did a poor job of trying to implement this. But I mean, we're coming up on the point where what a corporation does, the fact that a company like McDonald's is pulling out of a country like Russia right now, and the fact that you can't use major payment processors is more dangerous to the order of the world, right? Because to your point, there's multiple orders, just like there's in that those orders conflict, we have chaos. Oh, how about that? Like maybe that's a way of understanding order and chaos. But what the corporations have done are going to be far more harmful than like the sanctions on the oligarchs. Like I happened to catch some Fox News today, as you know, and it was all about the war drums, you know, and how all the bad things we need to do to Russia and Belarus. And, you know, and it was striking to me that continually throughout the rhetoric, what the administration has been hitting on is like these oligarchs and the fact that we're getting rid of these oligarchs' yachts. They're not going to have access to their yachts anymore. Isn't that funny? Right? Well, where do we see in that? We do see, in fact, the Marxist construction of class, where you have an underclass at odds with an overclass. That's chaotic by its nature. And I think so like going back to another point I made, I think the chaotic leftist is somebody who tries to accumulate power for themselves. It is the selfish power of Satan, we might say, to put it in a Christian frame. And I think, why is that? Because if you gain power to serve yourself, you're not really operating within like the bounds of an equilibrium, right? If it's all about me, well, then, you know, there's other people too, and that's going to cause problems at some point, whether you're a Napoleon or, you know, a Jeff Bezos.
Yeah. Oh, shit, man. See, you're touching on some of the stuff that I've been like reading about and thinking about, because like, you know, this all the corporate structure attacking Russia is very interesting to me. I read an article by Francis Fukuyama, Francis Fukuyama, who wrote the book called The End of History. And basically it's laying out how liberalism like won out. When the Soviet Union collapsed, liberalism won out. And what we're looking at is a liberal world order in which basically American hegemony is adopted around the world. And there's a guy named Alexander Dugin. I don't know if you've ever heard of him or read any of his stuff.
I haven't. I'm vaguely familiar and getting more. I've known about him for a while, but like trying to digest more of his work given recent events.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. I've been spending a lot of time on his website, like reading some of the stuff that he's writing about. So he wrote a piece that was a response to a Francis Fukuyama article, right? Well, one of the things that Francis Fukuyama says that it struck me as so odd, and I put this on Twitter the other day, and he was talking about Ukraine is fighting for the spirit of 1989. And I was like, what the fuck is the spirit of 1989? You know, like, what does this even mean?
Yeah.
And so I just Googled it. I just was like, I DuckDuckGo'd it, even though they're sellouts too. But I was just like, what is the spirit of 1989? And a Cato article from 2009 popped up talking about how the fall of the Berlin Wall was the ultimate signal of freedom, and that is the spirit of 1989, was freedom across the West and freedom entering Europe. So I'm like, so you're admitting without admitting that you're an internationalist, that you're not like in any way, shape, or form worried about your own nation. And so as I read Alexander Dugin, and I'm reading his arguments, and I'm reading, you know, the arguments from the West, and I'm like, is this just a nationalist versus an internationalist battle now? Is that what we're looking at? And so does that mean, like, does that put us in a situation where we can label the kind of czarist traditionalism of Russia as the new Nazi? And those neo-Nazis in Ukraine, well, they're fighting on the side of the internationalist. You know, was it Franklin Roosevelt that said he might be a son of a bitch, but he's our son of a bitch about Stalin? You know, like, so it's kind of one of those things like, oh, it's not about like when they're calling you a Nazi, when they're labeling you a Nazi, when they're labeling you a white supremacist, it's not actually about your ideology. Correct. Well, it is, but it's about the fact that you're a nationalist, not the fact that you're actually like adhering to the
the ideology of Hitler. When they say you're literally Hitler, it's because they're trying to pull back on the international global liberal order that has been forced down our throats, and that anybody who comes out in love of nation and love of country and trying to do what's best for your country above all else is now far right.
Yeah. Yes.
Because,
I mean, being a patriot is far right in 2022.
By any other metric, Trump was not on the right.
Right.
Any
Correct.
other metric.
Well, or under the metrics that existed currently. I want to throw a curveball. You probably know about this. Are you familiar with the practice of like sexing chicks?
Like just sending dick pics and shit?
No, like the actual animal, like the process of how you determine between a male and female chick.
Oh no, I'm not. I thought you were like sexting. I was like, wait, are you asking for a dick pic, dude?
Oh man. So I have to go and like do a little bit of extra digging, but because my source on this is a TV show from USA Network from a while ago. But they usually find some piece of information to like write things down on. And so basically it goes something like this, that like when chicks are born, they look basically identical. And so you don't necessarily know right away if they are male or female.
Right.
But then in like a factory, you got to figure out a way to do male or female. And there's like this factory maybe in Japan or something that figured out a way to train people to determine the difference between day-old chicks, whether they were male or whether they were female. And what they basically did was you would sit there and you would watch somebody as they were sorting the males and the females. And then after you watched them do it for a bit, you started to do it. And the person who you had been watching would say, no, that's wrong. And that's right. Or, like, that's wrong. You did that right. And then like after enough training, the person was able to get like near 100% of sorting things into that male or female category. This is a piece that I want to work on for beenawake.com. So this is kind of like a sneak preview, which is saying like, as I've been mulling over and my analogy is always the wave washing on the shore, right? It's like, it's a constant ebb and flow. Sometimes it makes a lot of sense. Sometimes it doesn't. And I've been really trying to wallow in the complexity of these terms left and right. Again, taking for granted that they point to something, right? That they are useful in some way. And maybe you discover that they're not, but I think we've both kind of agreed that at some level they're of some kind of use, or else they wouldn't have survived this long, even if they've changed from the original perspective.
Right.
So then it's like, okay, so like really, what are humans? What are our brains? Our brains are pattern recognition machines. And so what you can kind of look at, and I want to confirm this with what the people actually found in their study, is that you can take two things that look almost identical and still figure out the minor distinguishing characteristics that lets you sort things on a one-to-one basis, right? It's either A or B. It's a binary. You have only two choices. Well, hang on. Left, right. That's also a binary. It's also it appears to be in that it's used as a basic sorting mechanism. So now let's add another layer. So let's add a layer of complexity onto this. Namely, why is it that both of us come from a libertarian position? For whatever. So why is it that we talk about like, why do we say that we're against the left and we don't like what the left is doing sometimes, right? In our rhetoric, but we didn't, or at least I didn't for the longest time, consider oneself part of the right. See, for me, this is where I'll return to somebody like Yarvin, where he's like, I think Malice was interviewing him once and he said, oh, so you're on the right. He's like, yeah, in that I'm not a leftist. So in that you're not this thing, let's use the Hayward definition, in that you're not into maximal egalitarianism and maximal egalitarianism and maximal liberation. In that you're not that, you are by definition, as a matter of this basic sorting mechanism, you are right. You are on the right. That has been the only way I've been able to reconcile where I stand on that thing. Like taking the political compass, I was always bottom right quadrant, but probably closer to the center than most people would imagine. Somebody like me would be. But that more often than not has to do with the phrasing of questions. Yes. But to the point is like, okay, but so like, I was against the left, but what am I of the right? well, I've kind of decided that I have to be, if for no other reason than like I'm definitely not a leftist. Like whatever this thing is that is putting the Ukrainian flag on my profile picture while simultaneously hosting a drag queen story hour to tell me about the history of the Ukrainian people that everybody just learned yesterday, which as it happens to be is something that I've known my whole life because one of my closest friends is, Ukrainian. So it's like, and his family's immigrants, and we talk about how we hate the communists and all that kind of stuff because of my immigrant story with Cuba and communism as well.
Right.
So like, so like whatever that is, I'm not with it. You know what I mean? And honestly, it's like, oh, so maybe that's why in certain situations I've always been like an outsider in certain groups, whereas in other groups I'm not an outsider. I tend to fit in, and I'm not somebody like, I'm not a staunch traditionalist by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm not like this. And like I'm somebody who I in fact, if you were to ask, I was somebody who like thinks that he has very much a masculine and a feminine side, and I don't run from like the quote unquote softer areas of my psyche, my personality. I'm very open and like I like feelings and talking about them and things. But like I can also be a bro and like say, dude, shut up, you need to get back to work or else you're not going to be able to feed your family. Right. Like that's like again to the point, masculinity and the mistake of feminism. The mistake of so much of like 20th century, I guess you can call it liberalism, but I would say liberalism was stillborn, right? And basically socialism was the maybe socialism and liberalism were in the womb together, and socialism just devoured the other twin. I don't know. We can find an analogy that works if we try hard enough, but that just occurred to me in the moment. But like, I get why people put the pin on liberalism, and I'm somebody who's at this point like it's for me. Similar to like a Dugan, ironically enough, is for me, it's more about like what is the next form looking like, and that's why I kind of started this whole thing. I was like, yeah, part of the reason is that this authoritarian libertarian frame is not working. The authoritarian libertarian frame says that for some people that Joe Biden is equally as bad as Ron DeSantis. When I look at the world and I see that that's not the case, I know that my framework for understanding the world is out of whack, and I got to recalibrate to reality. Where what most people will do is dig their heels into the current ideology, right? Like I when I started my project, I didn't think I was going to write the post-libertarian moment defined. In fact, the first time I heard about post-libertarians or post-libertarianism, I'm like, this is stupid. Turns out it wasn't as stupid as I thought initially, But the reason why I got to that point was because I do my diligence and I try to understand things as carefully as I can. What's the problem with that? The problem with that is that means it takes a lot of work to build up to a point of understanding at the level of sophistication that I have. So the real task isn't building a complicated, sophisticated framework. Like you need that, right? You need that in order to run. The real task is, can I get the everyday person to understand these things? And so I necessarily have to lower my resolution of things. Like this is literally the idea behind smartphones, right? There's a ton of complex programming behind your computer, behind your smartphone. You just have to know how to push the buttons to make something work and hope to God you did them in the right order.
Right.
And that's an analogy to, again, how we always have to understand things. So where I'm going with that is to say, I think, again, that's where this left and right comes back into play, because it's something that every man can kind of wrap their minds around. Like I said, and one more point, just to, and this is like more on a personal side, but this is where like I'm not giving up the label libertarian, mind you, but like on my dating profile, I changed it from other to conservative, not because I think of myself in terms of a conservative, but I kind of understand now that conservative is a placeholder for for the right, and that generally speaking, those are the kinds of people I'm going to have more fun with. And by the way, like I don't mean this to be an insult to like religious people, but it's not just about religiosity, right? Like religion it's not just about becoming a perfect Christian and like I have nothing against people who are that. Whatever, we can get into my struggles with faith if we want, but suffice it to say I have them, and suffice it to say there's a lot of other people out there who are on the right who don't necessarily have an explicit religious framework. So it's not, again, it's not a one-to-one mapping of that, because I think a lot of people think that it is, and you miss allies when you do something like that.
You said something, and you're mentioning what Yarvin said to Malice about as per, I'm not on the left. Yes, I'm on the right. And that's how the left, or those we would typically call left, view it. If you're not with us, you're against us. And so if you view the world, or you try to dig into any bit of nuance, then you're automatically labeled on the right, which is interesting.
Right.
You know, which
Absolutely.
is why you would have more fun with a chick on the right on your dating profile.
Well, and really just not a leftist. You
Yeah.
understand? Like
Right.
literally just not even somebody who cares about politics, but is just not a rabid green-haired leftist.
Right.
Because I've talked to those people, and here's the thing, like, you know, somebody like me, I'm good on my feet. I'm verbally acute. I spent a long time trying to talk about, I spent a long time trying to operate under the assumption that, like, if you just put things in the right perspective, people will agree with you. And like, the reality is people don't care, because they're just going to go back to what they were thinking beforehand, unless you reach them at a particular point in time, which is to say, like, it's sad in a way. It's really sad. But like when somebody, like, I never, to the specifics, I never voted for Trump, never been a particularly fan of Donald Trump as a man. I think he's been a very interesting political figure. There's a lot to learn there. He's certainly hilarious. Understand now. What's that?
He's hilarious.
He's hilarious, right? Like, he's entertaining, but like, he's entertaining. You know what I mean? Like, there's all those aspects of him that I grant, but I was never a devoted fanboy. And yet and I'm just going to the dating thing because I'm a single guy, but like in the dating thing, when somebody has in their profile, like, swipe, don't match with me if you voted for Trump. I'm like, well, I didn't vote for Trump, but I'm also not going to be friends with you. Like, you know, like, I know, if that's the thing that you're saying, this is who I am as a person. This is, by the way, one of the reasons why I think millennials have such a issue with identity compared to past generations. You can look at like the longer through lines of like the destruction of the family and stuff, but in particular, like, we've been defining ourselves with no other input our entire life because of like profiles on the internet.
Yeah. Right.
Like, who are you? I don't know. I'm LB. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what am I at 14 years old? I'm nothing, like, you're nothing. And so, but yeah, we constantly have to identify ourselves to the world kind of with with this new way we interact vis-a-vis the internet. ASL, right? Like, what ASL, what's your age, sex, and location? Like, what's, what do you do? What's your job? All these like common markers that we use. And that's why I like the subject of identity, because I think again, it goes back to that point of we have to orient ourselves. We have to try and like interact with the world, and more importantly, as it is. And in order to change it, you still have to act with the world as it is. And so that's where, again, that's where it's like, to the specifics again, do I agree with like a strict interpretation of like the order? I have issues staying on if everything that I believe is right and everything somebody else believes is wrong, I know I'm not doing a good enough job on a situation. And an area, and like the conflict in Ukraine is a great example of this. Right? Like, because you can get lost in the, really there's very few people who are actively, I would argue, supporting Vladimir Putin outside of Russia and like certain small segments. I would say far more people are like, given the context of geopolitics, he might is there a better case than invading Iraq? Shit, when you look at it that way, kind of a little bit, right? But to your point, immediately you're cast as the enemy. Like, look at like I'm scared, man. I'm scared with what they're doing with this because they have to keep ramping up the rhetoric, and we're coming into a midterm cycle where this is going to be a thing. Like, this is going to be something that people vote on, and the question is how much of the broader population, like, it was just, sorry, I'm kind of bouncing all over the place, but like, it was asked of me today. It's like, okay, like this was by a close friend who doesn't pay close attention to politics and doesn't like, he knows me in a professional context. He doesn't know me as in my professional writing context. Right.
Right.
But so he's like, so, okay, but like, all right, so answer me this. Cause I was kind of like, shut up, Lindsey Graham. Cause we're sitting at lunch, like sitting at lunch and I have to listen to frickin' Lindsey Graham talk. And it's like, I'm like, I guess I'm happy they have Fox News on at this place, but at the same time, it's like awful. It could be MSNBC, I guess.
Right. Well,
but
that rhetoric's even worse. I don't know if you've heard this story that's come out here recently about how they were like saying Hitler is better than Putin.
Yeah, I've seen. Yeah. It's like
what
literally no, like there's no historical case you can make for that.
No,
you just have to
whatsoever.
rely on the fact that you have such a propagandized audience. And
Same
thing with the Fox News audience.
This guy ended up having to apologize because he got piled on, luckily. But his initial statement was that at least Hitler was not killing like Germans. And it's like, what? What are you talking about? Yeah, he's like, at least Hitler wasn't killing ethnic Germans. Putin's killing his own people. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? None of those Jews spoke German. None of them were Germans. Like,
well, and he kind of asked me, he's like, well, isn't it a good thing to support people who are fighting for freedom against like an authoritarian dictator? And my response to him was, like we could suss it out, but I don't know that the average Ukrainian has more or less freedom than the average Russian.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't think in effect, and again, it matters. Okay. What do we define that as?
Yeah.
Right. And this isn't somebody who's going to jump immediately to like, well, can the gays get married? Cause like it's so like, so there's, so I think the average, I don't know. I mean, like, I'm not an expert in the region, so I would defer to somebody with more expertise. And you could say like, but what I do know about Ukraine is that it's a pretty poor country relative to the rest of Europe, because a lot of the people there are still farmers. And so there's really not a lot of like high tech jobs there the way there is in other areas of the Eastern Bloc, in part because they don't have to, given the fact that Ukraine is fertile land, generally speaking. Same thing with Russia, right? Like Russia's not a particularly advanced economy either in comparison.
Right.
So like, it might be a different kind of freedom, but like, and that's just what I said to him in that context. And really it's
well, you're making a good point, because I was listening. I don't know if you ever watched The Hill, but Kim Iverson made a point today, and she said, "Look, I have family that lives in Russia. I have family that lives in Ukraine. Like, I have family from that area. That's where they live.
Yeah,
I've been to both places. They live the exact same. It's the exact same thing,
right?
And if Putin did take over Ukraine, there would be absolutely zero change to the average person's life on any scale whatsoever. Yeah. And it's like, well, that's interesting, like,
Well, and here's the interesting part. Here's another interesting point in that this conversation is about left and right. Okay. So let's say Putin is ostensibly right wing, right? That's okay. Let's say that I'm ostensibly right wing. To what extent does that mean there's any camaraderie between my position and his? Now we'll see how the decade turns out, I suppose. But if I'm being like, to be completely honest, but I say that as somebody who's listened very closely to Putin as one of the more interesting world leaders to pay attention to, given the scope of what Russia's position is in a world that's going from American hegemony to a multipolar world. Like, that isn't enough. Even Joe Biden, even the administration has been signaling that for all of Joe Biden's term.
Yes.
Multiple times, Joe Biden's rhetoric, because I make sure to listen to the important speeches, because I'm looking for the symbolism that they're trying to go for. Because, this is a nice tag I came up with for my website, which is demystifying the cult of American democracy. And so what Biden has said multiple times leading up to this current conflict is that the question of democracy is in peril. These authoritarian leaders, right?
The autocrats.
The autocrats around the world are saying that they're going to be the ones who can handle the 21st century better than democracy. And we have to prove them wrong. And so quite literally, that is why the United States and NATO are involved in a country like Ukraine. What I wrote this week, and we can bring it back to left and right, but what I wrote this week was, Your external borders as a country are the ones you defend, not the ones you let people walk over. And so guess what? That means the United States borders, as we understand the USG, right? The US globalists, the US government, as we understand the USG, their borders are not between Texas and Mexico. Their borders are with Russia, or with countries like Russia and China and North Korea and Iran, because those are people who, and formerly Iraq, right? Because those are areas of the world that are outside of their control. And it is a control mechanism that works on a global level, but it has nothing to do with the common American's perspective. Their usurpation. Why? Because of what I was talking about with progressivism winning the century. Because that is the corporate socialist structure, we might say. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene called it corporate communism. Like, you're so close. Corporate socialism is a much better, more descriptive, but I get why you say communist, because like communist is like, because communists are the total bad guys.
Communists. Yeah,
exactly. Well, but isn't it interesting though?
Oh, I was just going to ask you if you ever read that book, The Grand Chessboard by Zbigniew Brzezinski.
No, can't say that I have.
You got to read it, because like what you're saying, you'd be like, oh shit.
Well, what's the thesis?
All right, so what he's doing, it's a blueprint. It's a blueprint for American hegemony. Right? Okay. He wrote it in like 1972. Like, who Zbigniew Brzezinski is. I don't have to tell you that, right? Okay. So,
I've heard the name.
Yeah, he was a national security advisor to Carter administration. He was also involved in the Reagan administration.
Is this the one where he sets up that we're not going to do direct wars and we're only going to do little proxy wars to take out other powers?
He talks about that, but he also talks about like what the importance of each country is and what the benefits of getting involved in each country is. Right. And he really lays it out. It's just geopolitics. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And he has the entire book is separated into like segments. Like you have the Middle East and Asia and in Eastern Europe, and it's all separated out. And he's got all these maps, and he's telling you Kazakhstan because of this, and Ukraine because of that, and the middle, Syria because of that. And he's like laying it all out, and he's explaining how there's a limited window that the United States has to act. But if they act properly, that we could spread American hegemony across the globe before another superpower rises up. And so this is like his post World War II, speech of like, this is how we get America to encompass and rule and dominate, colonialize or imperialize the world. And we do it through culture, and we do it through proxy wars, and we do it, and he lays it all out. It's a great book. It really is.
Yeah. And where does that imperialist notion come from? At least for me, I'm going to bring it back to progressivism because, it's the book Illiberal Reformers by Thomas Leonard.
Okay.
But he specifically talks about how the adventurism and the imperialism of the early 20th century was a consequence of progressive thought, because the idea was we have to compete with these other imperialist nations, and we can in fact do a better job, and that's why we took over a place like the Philippines.
Right.
And what was the blow? Somebody, wasn't it Vanderbilt who offered to buy the Philippines, or who was the other guy? One of the Titans. It was Vanderbilt or Cornelius was his first name. Conrad, what was Conrad's last name? One of them. Well, that was in the anti-imperialist league with Mark Twain and a bunch of other people. I don't remember this. But he offered to buy the Philippines. Yeah, sorry. I thought I might even have to Google it. But like he offered to buy the Philippines after the United States ousted the Spanish, ousted the Spanish Empire, and then proceeded to take it over.
Yeah.
But so which is to say.
Oh, go ahead.
Carnegie. It was Carnegie.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Dale
Carnegie, not Vanderbilt.
Yeah. Okay.
It says Andrew here, but.
Oh, okay. That
American billionaire.
I think that was Dale's dad.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken.
So anyway, but to the point is like at that point in time, the imperialist mindset hadn't sunk into the Americans the way it is today, the way that we literally think of, like, this is the, I heard Kamala Harris talk about defending democracy, and I sat there and I thought, damn, this is Wilson come to life.
It's that Truman
That's what it is. It's still always been Woodrow Wilson.
It's that Truman
making the world
doctrine.
safe for democracy.
You know, after
and what is democracy? But
after World War II, what had happened? I don't know if you've ever read the book by Michael Swanson, The War State, but he lays it out there. He said what had happened was so many of the Central European countries' economies had collapsed, right? And if you polled the average person that during a time of depression or a time of recession, they would be leaning towards communism, and so democracy wouldn't work for these people, and because they would vote in communism, because communism looks really good to the downtrodden, because at least you're talking about bringing the rich down to your level. Even if you can't raise yourself up, you can at least make it equitable. And so he said the Truman Doctrine was to start pumping money into these countries to lift their standard of living so that they were more democratic.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we've been doing that ever since.
Well, and what do we see right now? That's why it's really not between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine is just caught in the middle.
That's why Francis Fukuyama says Ukraine is fighting for the spirit of 1989.
Right. Is because it's actually about the U.S. maintaining its control over things, and the reality is the U.S. I mean, I've kind of I like the way that USG is simultaneously U.S. globalist and U.S. government. Yeah. So and it's something that other people use. So I think I might start using it more to kind of represent what I'm talking about, because the vast majority of Americans, even the progressives, and this is tracing back again to our conversation of left and right. The vast majority of Americans would eventually settle into a new order in which the United States was actually not the world's policeman.
Yes.
Right? Like, because now we have to be the world's policeman, even though we really shouldn't be.
Right.
Right. And it was allowed when that's actually a testament, and interesting enough, to how much social capital they've had to waste fighting the war on terror. Is that now we're at the point where they can't allow dissidents, which is why you don't see the anti-war movement of a left. You only see the right Kremlin apologists. Because by the way, in what world is the Kremlin, the Red Devil, the right?
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
okay, but in the world, hang on. In the world in which the left has become the right.
I was going to say, in what world is Glenn Greenwald and Russell Brand the right? It's like
precisely. Well, and I think to the point, going back to kind of what I was saying, is like they're liberals, right? They're not necessarily they're not like full on progressives. I don't know enough about Russell Brand to really say that. Yeah. I know he was kind of a socialist, but to your point is like, in any order, he is going to be on the left, towards the left.
Yeah.
Does the fact that he cares more about maybe ordering the world right now make him a man of the right? I don't think so. And I think that's where you see the strict binary breaking down. That being said, I mean, like, Russell Brand might be cool, but I'm not really interested in having him have any control over power in things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
That's
I don't even know what he said.
I have a choice.
Demonizing him. I was like, wait, what? He's on the right now? Like, I don't even know what the hell he said to make him on the right.
Right.
You well, and shout out white power in the middle of a theater or something. Like, I don't know what the hell is going on.
Yeah, but basically, to your point, it's you're not with us or against us. Well, again, right. Okay, if we're gonna accept the idea that left and right are some like primal manifestation of temperament, let's say, right, at its basis level, which is kind of how I operate, then the worst things are going to be the opposite. So if you're generally speaking someone of the left, the worst thing is going to be the right. And if you're generally speaking someone of the right, the worst thing is going to be the left. I've made the point a lot, but like, it's not like humans haven't had these kinds of debates between materialism and providence.
Mm-hmm.
Because like materialism and providence is the debate between, you know, Stoics and the Epicureans.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not a strict, it's like I look at these as like human things. And I think in the evolutionary context, you can say that perhaps both of these behavioral archetypes are adaptive in a sense,
Yeah.
and adaptive to different environments. Where I think you see where the power dynamic of the chaos and order is helpful is to understand why, like, the otherwise non-interested, like non-political person, why they kind of get swept up into the left by default, with few exception. And I think that has a lot to do with serving power, which is to say, in a world in which more people are like, you know, let's say you're living in more of a 1960s, or, you know, let's say you're living in a town where everybody goes to church, you're going to go to church if you're that person. It's not because you're on the left or the right, it's because you're a follower. And most people are ballast. And it is the herd at the end of the day.
Yeah. So, well, and see, it seems to me, if you can make a correlation between materialism and providence and left and right, and not to say that one of them is left and one of them is right, but just the corollary argument. Well, I mean, I have this argument internally constantly. Right.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm not even a materialist. I don't have a lot of stuff. I'm not a big stuff person. I have books and I have my land, and, you know, I'm growing vegetables and doing all that stuff. But at the same time, sometimes I'll see something, I'll be like, oh, that'd be cool to have. That'd be cool. Because I went, all right, so like yesterday I had to get a battery for my bike because I'm trying to get my bike back up and running. But gas prices, I mean, I can save a shit ton of money, man. 5 gallons will last me like 2 weeks in my bike. So
yeah, thanks for giving me that last little push to buy a bike this summer.
Yeah.
So I've been wanting to for a while.
So I'm working on getting my bike back up and running. I was at the Indian dealership buying a battery to throw in there because I don't have a Harley dealership, you know, closer to me than I have the Indian dealership. And I was like, I can get a battery there. It doesn't matter. So I go in there and I'm looking, and you know those little 3-wheel things? I don't even know what they call them. They got the 2 wheels in the front and the 1 wheel in the back, and you steer with the rear tire. Okay, so Indian has its own version of that. But they're like shaped like classic like Corvettes, like 1964 type Corvette style bodies on them. And I'm like, that's fucking cool. I've never seen one of those on the road. If I got one of those, I'd be the only person riding one of those, rolling around in one of those, you know? And I was like, you know, but at the same time, and I'm like, no, I'm dumping all my money into making sure I survive whatever catastrophe is about to hit us, you know, like, you know, the only thing I can't do is build a bomb shelter because I live 12 feet below sea level, you know?
But to the point, right? Yeah, I think it is one of those things that's a constant battle inside of a lot of people. And I think in other people, it's less of a battle. You know, I think more people given genetic diversity, more people are going to be selected towards either end of that, whatever this spectrum or like line that we're talking about is.
Yeah. But if you're not,
because I think there's also a clear,
I was just going to say, if you're not definitively on the left and you're having this internal conflict, they push you to the right. You know, if you're an independent in today's age, you lean Republican. Why? You always lean Democrat before, but it's because they don't want you. They only want those that fall in line. And
which is a marker, you could say, of an ideology that isn't in coherence with like reality. At least that's the way I would look at it. Right. It's because, like, you know, that people ask, well, why is the rhetoric so bad? It's because they're trying to hold on to the audience. They've already lost a bunch of people, like more people than you think. I mean, I don't know if you've experienced this too, but more people kind of walking up to you and being like, yeah, like, why am I seeing the same burning building every day when everybody has a cell phone in Ukraine? Like, they really want me to, you know, they like, these are people who are more plugged into the mainstream, right? Like I've had a couple of them just like very honestly, like, yeah, you know, like, it's bad, but why is it wall-to-wall coverage? Like, why is this just, and what they're noticing is they're also noticing, like, why is this a lot like the COVID coverage?
Yeah. And
So
why
I
did
think
COVID
they've really
just suddenly disappear?
I mean, everybody sees that, but also more people than I think more people. My contention would be that more people understood the falsity of things. Like the level of true believers is always small. You know, it's always 3%.
Yeah.
It's always like, 10% at most, right? Of the true believers. It's just a question of who those true believers are and in what positions are they in. This is why I think the post-libertarian moment kind of happened in our circles, and why people are now saying, like, yeah, maybe you got to make sure that you, like, what I say is you have to become an authority, whether that's in your personal life or whether you decide to run for an office or just have your own business where you hire people and stuff like that. You have to take on that responsibility of power, that, the responsibility that comes with, like, power and making yourself better. Otherwise, you're not going to win, because you're not going to win through a fucking election. That sure shit isn't going to happen. Not with 330 million people voting, because enough of them are dumb to where they're just going to be swayed by the rhetoric. I mean, there are people who take the bell curve, and there are people who reject the bell curve, and the people who reject the bell curve are people who don't understand the world as well. It's just, and that's not, it's not mean to people. You know what I mean? Like, that's the whole point. And I would say that's the message of Christ in a way, is to still see the humanity of people, to see Christ in others, even the others who are unlike you. Right. And in this particular instance, I might be talking about, like, something like intelligence, but it goes, but there's a harmonizing that comes when you actually embrace that. I feel, because, like, it's I don't know.
Oh, I was just going to say, you brought up Jordan Peterson earlier, and one of the things that he said that always stuck with me is, whenever you engage somebody in conversation, do so with humility, because that person can always teach you something. There's always something that person knows that you don't know. Right.
Yep.
And so I think is it fair? Maybe not. No, maybe it's not fair to say that.
Say it anyway, and we'll find out.
I was just going to say, is it fair to say that those on the right are more humble when it comes to information? But then I think of Sean Hannity. And
well, I think to your point, when you try to, I think when you're using a basic, okay, so let's go back to the idea of sexing chicks that we were talking about before. Just because I know this chick is a female and this chick is a male doesn't mean I know what plumage the rooster is going to have, or, the hen will be, if they're going to be, right. There's still phenotypic differences that can manifest themselves at different points in time. So your question was whether they're more humble, and I think in some instances, I think in some instances they are, and in some instances they're not. And in fact, if you've caught a theme from everything a lot I've been saying, is I actually don't think that left and right are necessarily at odds, evolutionarily speaking, or in the context of a broader society. Like, I do think there is a degree to which you need the creative, and you need the manager who doesn't have a creative bone in his body. Right.
You need that, like, push and pull.
I do think there is an element to that, where what I see is a world in which the elites, you might say, are just trying. There is a class of people. There are schools of thought that are trying to hold on to power, and they are losing it, but they are doing everything they can to hold on to it. And part of what leftism is wrapped up in that phenomena. The ballerinas, the actor, you know what I mean? Like, the ballerinas and the actors will still be ballerinas and actors.
Right.
Yeah, right. Like, they'll still go on and do their shows. They just live in a cult. What we do, I think, in part, is we reflect reality. If you go to my Instagram at DLB Muniz, Muniz, you can see, like, a little, one of the things I put up there recently was, like, a whiteboard sketch. And I like using a whiteboard at home a lot, and I said, like, lines that reflect reality. Cause I'm trying to read Euclid. I'm trying to read, like, old geometry to try and build some stuff up. But like those systems that we were talking about, like what you can put your thoughts into. But so like I had like the straight line with 2 arrows on the end, which is like, you know, that it keeps going, the number line. I have the Cartesian plane. I had a triangle. I had a circle, and I had a bell curve. And like all of those lines reflect reality. Not that it is reality, but they reflect reality.
Yeah.
And so too, human beings kind of reflect. We're also reflections of ideas in a sense. And so, you know, like I like saying that people will take an idea and will run with it. Now, enough people are kind of outside of that. Like we're outside of that. We're the people that want to take things apart, pick them out, like really explore them deep in depth. And there's a lot of people who enjoy listening to those kinds of conversations. None of this falls into 100%. That's the egalitarian delusion. Everything is distributed, and it's not going to be distributed evenly. Right. So when we start to build our framework up like that, like, oh, well, now things make a lot more sense. You know, like, you know, to use my tagline of that, of trying to make sense of the world. When we understand that most things exist on a Pareto distribution, whether that be intelligence or whether that be, you know, hardworking, you know, people being conscientious and hardworking. Like that's, some people are going to have more of that than others. But most people are going to have a decent bit, and you're going to have the tails, and then you're going to have the tails at the end. People with none, people with too much, you might say, at times. Like that is the bell curve that represents it. Doesn't map on exactly. It doesn't mean that I think somebody is at this point and that they are actually at that point. We would have to do more, but I can understand that people in general fall in terms of a bell curve. And that would go for people on the left and people on the right. So there's going to be the crazy leftists who are trying to destroy civilization. And yeah. And then there's going to be, again, the ballerina who just wants to keep her job. And so she's going to say the things that she needs to say.
It's funny that you keep bringing that up, because last weekend I brought Beatrix to the ballet. We went and saw Snow Lake, and it was it's the Russian theater.
Nice.
And they're on their curtain, when you're waiting on them to raise the curtain, it says, "We dance for peace." And it's like they felt such a threat, because you see all these people getting canceled and, you know, basically told they can't play tennis in Wimbledon and all this stuff, that they felt such pressure that you're like, we have to do something like to make sure that we can continue, because they live in the U.S. They just toured the U.S. They're Russians that moved here, and that's what they do. They tour the U.S. and do ballet in the U.S. So if they were to be, you know, quote unquote canceled, that would like devastate them. You know, they've, you know, moved all the way across the world, you know, 7,000 miles or whatever, to just be like shut out of society completely. And I was like, we were kind of chuckling about it, but I was like, you know, it's necessary at this point in time, because of the environment that we live in and how loud and forceful these people are, and how much power they want to wield in order to force their ideology and their thought process down other people's throats, right?
And I would say at this point, they're more concerned with compliance than they are with buy-in too. Like that's very clear to me as well.
Yes. Yeah. They don't care if you believe it. You just have to say 2 + 2 = 5.
Yeah.
You just have to say it.
Right. And I think to the point of our conversation, is that person representative of leftism, or is that person representative of the worst elements of what we might call leftism?
Yeah. And that's why
I would say I think it's the latter.
Yeah, that's what I have an issue with. And this is what me and Popular Liberty were like going back and forth about, because I was like, man, it seems like it's authoritarianism that we have a problem with. Like, you know, I'm not saying that the libertarian ideology has figured everything out, but at least they're not trying to make me live in ways I don't want to live. You know, like they're not trying to make me do things, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, as somebody who lives in a state like Illinois, I mean, I look at Florida and I think, damn, I'm glad somebody like Ron DeSantis is out there. And I'm not going to afford the luxury of this ideology. Like there are deeper principles that I hold true to than like this. That because there are people who think Ron. I literally it's on my. You can go listen to it. It was a guy named Liquid Zulu who's from like the UK, I think. I'm not trying to be disparaging because I don't actually know where you're from, but I'm pretty sure it was the UK. Judging off his accent, but like where he was, our debate, our kind of impromptu debate was about whether Biden and DeSantis were equally authoritarian and were equally at fault. And this guy's trying to make an argument from natural law, and he's saying that natural law is libertarian law, and it's like, well, no. Like libertarian law might have a lot to do with natural law, but natural law per se is a Catholic invention. It's a Christian invention.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and so if we're really going to argue, so whatever. So it's a worthwhile perspective. I called the episode conflicting epistemic frames, or that was the subheader for it, because that's really what was happening was I'm putting these things into a calculus. And so I look at something like what Joe Biden was doing with vaccine mandates, and I say, no, that's really, really bad. And I look at somebody like Governor DeSantis saying like, hey, guess what? Corporations, you don't get to put your vaccine mandates. And I say, you know what? That's good. It might be quote unquote authoritarian, but that's the right thing to do in this context.
Yes.
It's funny because like I've taken shots at like agorism again, kind of speaking to the audience here, but it's like, there's all this question of consistency. It's like, okay, what is consistency actually good for? And what I've written is that the only consistency that matters is consistency in challenging yourself. Mm-hmm. Like consistently saying the same thing just means you're a freaking rock sitting next to a stream. That stream is going to wear you away eventually. Yeah. Be like water. Like that. That is my perspective on things. I am more of the water, the idea of becoming. There is no end, only new beginnings. And so the question is, what's coming next? Which is where I go back to the recalibration I think we have to do. And that's,
you should be consistent with things that work.
Right. Well, yeah. The more things work, the more you should do.
Yeah. That's where your consistency should come in. Mm-hmm. But consistency of thought is not necessarily a winning argument, because I could have the worst idea in the world and just stick by it.
And I'm sure you and I have both had conversations with people who do exactly that. Yeah. And like I have friends that will do that just to piss me off,
I'll do that too sometimes.
Yeah, and full disclosure, I do too. Even if I know I'm not, because I'm a stubborn dude sometimes.
Well, sometimes it's just fun to watch people get frustrated.
Correct. Right. Exactly. But so it's like, so to the point, and that's why you have to laugh.
And I'm consistent about that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I'm consistent about challenging what consistency is.
Right. Okay, so I want to ask, like, in this conversation, have you come to any more conclusions than you had entering it?
I think a lot of this is kind of where, like, that's like the big story that I've been trying to tell to put things in perspective. What I would say is, I think my mapping of left and right is contextual terms that need some kind of unifying idea in order for them to cohere, is not conflicting with the paradigm of order and chaos. And I reconcile that again by kind of moving between the different states of our being, right? The instinct and the reason. It's not like the interplay works on both levels. Yeah. I think where and in particular, it particularly works in that order always opposes chaos, right? And like where chaos exists, order is there to conquer it. But that's why I think those things are something different. The other side of that coin, though, is that, and this is where it is useful in a popular sense to say that the left is chaos and the right is order. Right now. I don't think that would always be the case. And I think and there is a I'm going to be sitting down with Popular Liberty tomorrow. We're recording this on Thursday, the 17th. I'm going to be sitting down with him tomorrow. We're going to be going through like an old book by this like bishop who's kind of in communion with Rome, but not in communion with Rome, where he basically says it's all liberalism's fault. And like this isn't this isn't towards the substance, this is just towards the style. But and this is, again, where I don't consider myself a theologian. I'm a sense maker, I'm a philosopher. Like that is the path that I walk. So it's decidedly different than a theologian or a priest or a reverend. There's corollaries, right? Like there's correlations there, but they're not exactly the same thing. There's this element of like there's like this element of like an old man shaking his fist at the world that we all become at different times that I read in something like this. The other point is like, I heard this on, I like Ryan Long, the comedian. He's kind of new. He's from Canada. He's got a new special, but he's the guy that he does like a sketch every week. So he did like the woke racist sketch. His most recent one, Scott Horton retweeted about like Ukraine for life and how like Ukraine's now become his identity because it's the new thing. And he's really, really funny. And he's like tapped into this. He's tapped into something.
And like it's like the 2 minutes of hate is here, and it's every time I turn around, I'm supposed to hate something new, and I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about right now.
Literally, right. But so what he said on a podcast recently, and it kind of stuck with me because it's like, like the left's going crazy right now, but like, like the right's only answer seems to be the right doesn't have an answer for it. What do they have? Christianity. And like, I'm not disparaging Christian people. I consider myself one of them, but I'm also not going to sit here and pretend like, if that was 100% the solution, wouldn't it have already been figured out? And wouldn't this never have happened before? Like, so where does the corrupting thing come from?
I have something for you to talk to Popular Liberty about. And full disclosure, I really like Popular Liberty. We're actually friends.
I consider him a friend.
Yeah. We're friends. So I've brought him up a couple of times tonight. And I don't do so because I have any disrespect to him. I did so because that's a perfect example of me having a conversation with somebody I respect and like and enjoy talking with, that we were like kind of going back and forth.
And I would say for this perspective of like the strict categories of order and chaos, he's one of the best proponents for it. Like this is an area where I've, him and I haven't had like a full on drag out fight about it, but I'm sure we will eventually. Because like our perspectives differ on it. You know what I mean? And but which is to say, I have learned from that perspective. That's why I try to look for harmonies. So of course, the utmost of respect for him as a thinker and like putting these ideas forward. But I'm sorry, you were saying.
Oh, I was just gonna say, one of the things I've been curious about, or I've just been kind of like contemplating. I haven't even really like looked into it any, or like taken it any further, and just kind of thinking about it a little bit. But it would be something interesting to talk to him about, whether you bring it up to him or I have him on and talk to him about it. But everybody, like, it's commonly believed that the United States was founded as a Christian nation.
Sure.
Paul, his entire goal when he was going through and he was on his missions and he was evangelizing, was to convert the Caesar to Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up happening after Paul's death. Then you had all that where Rome became a Christian nation. But I'm wondering if that, what we call evangelizing in religion, we call imperialism when it comes to a nation. And if part of the idea of the imperial government of the United States is an evangelical movement across the world.
Yeah. I think it is. And I think you trace it to, I trace it to progressivism. If the United States was, I don't think it's unfair to say the United States was founded as an ostensibly Christian nation, although some people would disagree with that. But I do think that the progressive movement usurped that 100%. It was a new founding of the country. For all intents and purposes, we're on the second or third constitution of the United States. The way, the way that the French are on like their third or fourth republic, whatever it is. might even be like 6th or something at this point. Like this is the like a lot of people say to read Burnham, what you really learn from Burnham is an anti-formal approach. And I say it that way because it's like, yeah, that's what skepticism is, and that's what I'd been doing for a long time. And that's why, like, when suddenly everybody started talking Burnham, I was like, oh, hey, you guys are saying what I've been saying for a while. This is kind of cool. And I'm not trying to like make myself sound super smart. I'm leaning on the shoulders of giants as it is. It's just that what Burnham provides is that my opinion, Burnham offers that anti-formalist approach to really crystallize the idea of just because words are written down on a piece of paper doesn't make them true. You have to analyze. You have to try.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I thought his best book was Suicide of the West.
Yeah, I've only read the Machiavellians.
I got more out of Suicide of the West than I did out of the Machiavellians.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, because what he's doing is he's tying everything. He's like basically laying everything out that we've been talking about with progressivism. And he's saying, yeah, this is liberalization. This is what they always meant. Now,
yeah, and I guess that's the loop I have to close for myself.
Yeah. You might want to read that book. It's actually a really easy read. I mean, I flew through it. I have it on audio book, and I listened to it in 2 days. I mean, it was so good. I couldn't shut it off. I do have a little bit of pushback. So you're talking about the imperialism is a progressive idea.
Yes.
I had read, I can't even remember what book it was. I don't even know if it's one I have or if one I gave to my dad or what. I read a book. The guy said that the imperialism and the interventionism of the United States is the evolution of Manifest Destiny.
Yeah, Manifest Destiny was...
And so that whenever we hit... whenever the United States expanded into California and it had stopped, the economy stagnated. And so in order to reignite the economy, we needed more land, more territory. So they started moving overseas, and that the constant interventionist policies that you see America engaging in is just a more modernized Manifest Destiny.
Yeah. So Manifest Destiny, according to history.com, was coined in 1845.
I think it was Thomas Jefferson's thing, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm just reading this here. I think people look at Jefferson, but I don't know that. Here you go. Well, it says that President Thomas Jefferson kicked off the country's westward expansion in 1803 with the Louisiana Purchase.
Okay.
So I think you could like trace Jefferson's that choice by Jefferson eventually became what was called Manifest Destiny.
Gotcha.
You know what? I think that's a good point. I think that I think it does fit into the calculus, and I thought you were even going to go like Hamilton on me for a second, because you could go Hamilton, because there always has been but there always has been the natural, like the nationalist impulse, right? The centralizing impulse for statecraft that's existed in the United States as a whole. And so, what I would lean on at that point in the argument would be to say, well, that means that would then point to a recurring theme in human politics, where there's always this tension between the centralizer and the imperialist, and the person who and effectively the person who wants to respect other people's borders, which is actually a very rare thing. If you look at like history, like statecraft historically, right? So it kind of like follows from that different calculations are being had by different people at different times. So
right.
I think Manifest Destiny though begets the social gospel, which is very much a progressive construct.
Yeah.
And that social gospel removes enough of like the actual Christian God from the equation to where you can use it to justify anything you want.
Yeah. And one of the things.
Well, good pushback. Yeah, it's a good point, because I haven't, like, that's why I say like this is all very much like in my head. And to a conversation we were having, I don't know if we were recording or not, but like this could very, you know, like this is a book unto itself, right?
Yes.
Trying to
Yeah.
work my way through this stuff and actually provide the best historical case to ground my arguments.
Right. Yeah. One of the things I'm about to start reading is H.G. Wells nonfiction.
Mm.
And he has, I can't remember the name of it, and I'm not going to get up and grab the book. But there's one of the books, he's talking about utilizing the elites utilizing internationalism in order to bring forth a new religion. And it's like, oh man, look at what they did to Notre Dame. Is that what we're like living through right now? You know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. You mean that fact that like the symbol of Christianity in Europe burned down?
yeah. Well, no, and then they're rebuilding it,
And they're rebuilding it to
as
a woke
chapel.
temple. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you've seen, you know, like if I'm sure you follow woke preacher clips on Twitter as well, but like if you don't, you should.
No, I don't.
Oh yeah.
I didn't
look
even
'em
know
up.
it was a thing.
It's a thing, and I honestly can't watch a lot of the stuff they put out, but I'm glad they're there. So what we see as well is like, and this is, you know, we could say this is a critique against the right, and in fact, I think it is. It's like, okay, so then how do you explain the corruption of the church? Because I don't think you can point to a single church sufficiently sophisticated like church apparatus that isn't corrupted. And I don't know about the Russian patriarchy, but I'm sure it's close. I'm sure there's corruption there too. And maybe I'm wrong. And then maybe therein lies the difference, and maybe therein I will see the light. But you know, but like to the point of like, I never experienced the the horrors of the Catholic Church that existed in like Boston and other places. But like I know they exist, right? And so like, how do you reconcile that? I've heard stories of like pretty powerful bishops having to kick seminarians out of school because they were going to gay nightclubs. I don't have a problem with someone going to a gay nightclub. I have a problem of a seminarian who's gonna, you know, like who's gonna become a priest and take on this responsibility to like go to any nightclub, really. Yeah. You know, like, but let alone a gay one. And with the by the way, not with the ostensible purpose of like, oh, we're gonna kind of like go and see this, you know, this nightlife and blah blah blah. It's like, no, we're gonna go and hook up, right? It's like,
yes,
it's like this was a story that was told to me from like some pretty high up people in the Catholic Church. So it's like how do you? So there's that element too, which to me isn't like, I don't look at that as a condemnation of like of a church or the church, as the case may be. I just use that to point out that, again, if everything I believe is good and everything they believe is bad, I'm probably missing something. Is the reality. I just you know, that do you ever read or watch the movie Ender's Game?
No.
It came out when I was growing up, and so I read it as a kid. It's like this post-apocalyptic world, alien comes in, destroys the planet, so they basically just draft all of humanity to try and fight them. And what they realize is that kids are better at fighting than adults for like strategy and stuff because they're more malleable. Yeah. And so first off, I realized how like it's like, oh wow, I really like identified with that character as a kid because I'm watching the movie. I'm like, damn, that's so funny. Anyway, but the second thing, like in the movie, what he talks about is that you can't truly defeat an enemy until you understand it. And when you understand something, you can't hate it. Like it's impossible to hate something you understand fully.
Right.
And I would completely agree with that sentiment. And so as it relates to this question of left and right, in some respects, left is the perennial enemy of right, but in the same way that the sun is the perennial enemy of the moon.
Yeah.
You know, like mythologically speaking, like archetypally speaking, symbolically speaking, right? As night follows day.
You have to have the inverse
in order to understand it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that definition,
which is why biblically there's the Antichrist. Like,
yeah.
In order to really appreciate the essence of Christ, you have to be able to see the Antichrist.
Right, because the devil isn't God's equal.
Right.
Yeah. Or he can't be, right? Because God created the devil, ostensibly.
Well, no, the Antichrist is different than the devil. The Antichrist is the inversion of Christ. So it looks like Christ, it sounds like Christ, to those that are untrained. But when you look at what the fruits of its tree, is begotten evil and not good. Right.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's an inversion. It's the exact same attitude and action with the opposite goal in mind.
So I don't know if then it would be Christ and Antichrist for left and right. I think closer night and day, because or sun and moon, because what we know about astronomy has actually taught us that the moon is just reflecting the sun.
Right.
And so I think what this left and right thing is like, it's only understood in terms of its opposite, which is to imply both are necessary. I just think, and this is, I'll preface this by saying, I do think I kind of look at Jordan Peterson as somebody who has like all the baubles of the world being shined in front of his face so he doesn't pay attention to real problems. Like I kind of like, there's this like image of him when I watched, because I don't watch his podcast very much, but I was watching his interview with Brett Weinstein and Heather Hine when they released their book, which I recommend. And there was like this intense feeling I got watching that of like being trapped in the most lavish cage in the world. And maybe this is me reading something into a situation, because I'm trying to understand his poor takes lately, or like the fact that he wasn't with like the trucker protests in Canada or all these other things that are going on. And I think
he released videos in favor of them.
Yeah, but there's like a part of me that says, why didn't you go? Like, I know it's really tough to travel.
Well, he was on tour.
Well, but I'm saying though, like, yeah, okay, your tour, like, there's excuses. But anyway, it's just a thought.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I just know that's what he said. He was on tour, and like, I can't get back there. I had previous,
right, previous engagements. And again, that's a different thing, and probably wanting more from him than he actually is. But I just preface it by saying, like, I'm not. This isn't to say I'm like blinded to some of his
just
recent.
Didn't want to get arrested.
That too, right? Yeah, could it just not worth the risk? Yeah. And to be fair, why take that risk if you can go and make more money?
Right.
Like I understand that completely. Like that would say, in fact, I would probably give him that advice if I was advising him. It's the symbolism of it though that's stuck with me. Here you have Canada's champion in a sense. Right. And when the people of Canada rallied, where was their champion? Their champion was making money in Boca.
Well, and that's why I discovered Viva Barnes. I mean, Viva
Fry. Yeah, I like that show. Yeah, I like that.
Like, I would never know who he was other than he was there every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But what Jordan Peterson said, but that was a long preamble, was the right is really good. Like, part of what the right does is create borders, right? Or create a limit to something.
Yeah.
Like, this is my house, that's your house. Right. Or, and this is the order elements of right in particular, the patriarchal elements of right, we might say in particular, that says, no, this is my family. I'm going to take care of them. You're part of a different family. Like, this food is for us first, because that's how we have to do things. And he said the left is not good at that. It's not good at drawing borders around its negative elements. And like, we're basically just, I think that is one way. That's like a sliver of the circle that makes up the sphere of what we are experiencing in this reality, is the fact that nobody on the left is willing to rein in their own. And the left has been trained to hate the right. Like, one of the things that I've realized since kind of being like, yeah, I guess I'm just kind of a moderately right-wing guy, like nothing crazy, just not leftist. I'm just not a leftist. That's all it is. I'm just not a leftist. I just don't buy into the egalitarian delusion. That's really all it is.
Right.
Is realizing how much rhetoric is used to castigate the right. And so then I think, and I look, then I think of what happens to somebody on their intellectual journey when that's the case, before they even understand these terms. Well, like, maybe find like a temporary home like libertarianism that kind of like lets you fight the left, fight the communists, but not have to call yourself a right winger, because that's what a Nazi is. And so you see how the social engineers set up the roadblocks to kind of prevent people from going down certain paths. So I've written about this. What was one of my recent pieces, or maybe one of my next ones? We'll talk about this idea a little bit too, or like a tweet thread I had kind of went through, why. Oh, it was Matt Iglesias was like, why is it that the universities are dominated by left-wing thought? It's like, okay. So, and I kind of like went through and I'm like, okay, well, if you're talking about selection mechanisms over generation and you're selecting for left-wing thought, like eventually you get to the point, and left-wing being synonymous with progressivism in this case, eventually you get to the point to where somebody thinks if I am intellectual, then I must be left-wing. And they might literally be left-wing, but they might also not.
Is there something about, I don't know, maybe I'm just asking here. I have no idea. Like, is there a differentiation between a thinker and a doer as far as neuroticism and conscientiousness?
Oh, sure. Right.
If you're, don't you, like, whenever you think of somebody on the right, like a right winger, aren't you thinking more of like blue collar, like more of a doer, more of somebody who's like in the dirt, you know?
Yep. Well, and I say that's how we think of it today. Because to your point, historically, or maybe this is where you're going, maybe it's not, but like blue collar, that's union, right? Union's been considered left wing for the entire 20th century.
Exactly.
And that goes to my point of recalibration, where we're actually seeing we're seeing a resorting of this thing we call politics.
So maybe,
and in fact,
maybe we should have spent 2 hours talking about resorting and not left and right.
I think we touched upon it. I
mean, we did, but I mean, maybe that's like the important like conversation to have is the.
I think that's the next conversation to have for sure.
Yeah, like why is Russell Brand and Tulsi Gabbard and Glenn Greenwald lumped in with the right? Like, what is happening? Like what? Yeah. Like, what is this recalibration? And maybe it's back to, like I said, the original like differentiations was the anti-establishment versus the establishment. And maybe that's what we're turning back to where all the differences between, you know, like, cause I remember in Rothbard's piece, left and right in the prospects of liberty, he's talking about how the socialists actually like hijacked the left from the anarchist, from the Bastiat types, and the socialists took it over, and is because they didn't have a home, and so they latched on to the anti-establishment, and then they spread the rhetoric through the anti-establishment and took over the anti-establishment, and then they left the original left homeless.
Well, and let's jump on the other thing you just said. Anarchy is about a lot of thinking.
Yes, it is.
Let me just be frank. As somebody, I mean, I've a lot of my friends are of anarchist schools. I'm a skeptic, so it's really not it's not super consequential to me. It's like, so like, but you know who are doers? The socialists were doers.
Well, and just to kind of poke at you, so are the agorists.
Yeah, I guess I don't go after the ones that are doing shit. That's for sure. But you know what? You're probably right. But my perception are like really annoying people on Twitter. Like that's what I think of when I think of agorism.
Yeah. I mean, I started off like homesteading, thinking myself an agorist. So,
well, I mean, like I would homestead. Like I'm interested in homesteading. And like I want a hobby farm. You know. Like I want to like that is like a long-term 10-year goal for me, is to be able to afford something like that. You know, hopefully have like a family to bring to it or something, but like that is a long-term goal for me, but for me, does that mean I'm an agorist? That's a question of how many people call themselves an agorist, really. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think the only agorists I've met are like Sal Mayweather, John Bush, you know, like, and those guys are out there doing things like, what's his name? Jack, I could have his name wrong now. The Survivalist podcast. You know, he's always doing, and all his podcasts are about, this is how you can do this, and this is how you can do that. You know, like, and I consider him like an agorist. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, like, listen, I consider myself firmly on the thinker side of things. And, but you know what I've been working on really hard is the left. But I've been working very hard on the doer side of my personality.
Yeah.
You know, and that's been like a very, like, you know, the writing, the podcasting is a matter of doing. I spent a lot of time saying I was a writer before I actually was a writer. You know, and like now I have no qualms about saying that about myself. And like my friend will say like, oh, you know, like your podcast is your best stuff. And it's like, yeah, but the writing is where it comes from. Like those are getting the reps in. So like, you know, like I'm perfectly willing to, you know, like and again, I look for the balance, right? The question isn't whether one is great or one is the other or one is the worst. It's a question of it's a question of the fruit that's actually produced.
Yes. Yeah. It's by their fruits, they shall be known, you know? And I think that's, you know, it's one of the things I've always told my wife is like, no matter what you think about like religion or Christianity or anything like that, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That book has so much wisdom in it. You need it. Like I don't care about whether you want to be an atheist or not. You need to hold on to that book because that wisdom has lasted thousands of years for a reason.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
But I think, man, we're at a great stopping point. I did want to ask you about post-libertarianism, but I mean, we've been going for a while, and I gotta eat at some point.
Yeah, I had like a hard-boiled egg right before we started.
Man, I'd hate to be sitting in that room with you right now. All right, well, plug away, man.
Yeah, well, hey guys, if you like anything that you heard here, please do me a favor. Visit beenawake.com, become a subscriber. All you need to do that is your email address. It's Substack is my home. That's where I'm going to be putting all my content out going forward. That's like the home base. I am putting more out on Instagram, so follow me there on all social media at the LB Muniz.
Yes, and yeah, definitely like give his Substack a check out, man. I'll link it in the show notes and all that because you are one of the you're one of the most even kill thinkers out there. Like you're really go after ideas, and you can tell that you're struggling with them throughout the piece.
Yeah,
so,
that really is what I try to do. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't read everything you put out, but when I do sit down and read it, I always enjoy it.
Yeah, I don't expect everyone to read it. That's the funny part is like, oh, I'm so like you talk to your friend or like a family member who supports you and they're like, oh, I haven't read it. I'm like, yeah, no, it's fine. Like this is the cool, like that, like going back to the thing of being a writer, once you realize like once you just accept like the passion of it, and it really is a passion for me. Like I'm chasing numbers. Don't get me wrong. I want this to be something I can do full time or at least be like the more of my income base. Right. But like, I also kind of realized I'm never going to stop.
Yeah, exactly. Like I started writing when I was like 12 years old. Like I started writing poetry and then I'd start writing short stories in my 30s. And I'm like, you know, it'd be cool if I could make $40,000 a year and do it for a living, but I'm not going to stop doing it. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like, it's part of who you are now, you know, like once you start doing it. So, but all right, man, I'm going to stop the recording. And we're going to call this one quits because we're going to go for another 6 hours.
If you're gonna play, scam, pick and choose, well, it's a game that was made for you to lose. It doesn't really matter how many times, it's the same old worn out stories, same old lines. They're all pointing dirty fingers in hypocrisy, bragging on their feats of mediocrity again. Never really making any kind of change, but they keep on getting re-elected, and I find that strange. And that's why I say fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that have taken our freedoms. Yeah, I said fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that have taken our freedoms. What's it gonna take for you to see that we're living in a rigged democracy? People stand in line for the things that they've been choosing, paying no attention to the rights they keep on losing. But they all gather in the rallies and they chant their names, on goddamn well that it's all gonna be the same. say fuck them, don't feed them cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedom. Yeah, fuck them, don't feed them cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedom.